Good evening. Welcome to BachTalk. I'm your host, Carlton Monroe, and thank you for joining us as we take this deep dive into Bach's music. We'll be talking about the cantata that we'll be performing at our Bach Vesper service coming up on November the 21st. And today I'm joined by, as always, Adam Shoaff, who's going to be giving us our deep dive into that music. And our special guest today is a good friend and a longtime participant with the Bach Ensemble, Kate Tombaugh. Kate, welcome. Glad to have you here too.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. So without any further ado, Adam, I'm going to let you take it away and tell us about this music we're going to be working on next week.
All right. Thank you, Carlton. And thank you to everyone tuning in. Go ahead and do the share screen. To get the slide going. All right. This week's cantata, BWV 117, Sei Lob und Ehre dem höchsten Gut, presents modern audiences with something of a mystery. First of all, we don't actually know when it was composed. It's generally thought to have been written between 1728 and 1731, which would place it after Bach's most focused period of cantata composition in Leipzig. And then there's also a lack of references in the text to the schedule of weekly Bible readings, so we don't know which Sunday in the church calendar it might have been composed for. So then why did Bach write this late cantata after he had turned away from cantata composition? Well, based on certain characteristics, which I'll explain in greater detail later in the talk, we think that Bach may have composed this cantata for a special celebration. In other words, the impetus for this cantata may lie outside of Bach's normal Sunday morning duties at St. Thomas and St. Nicholas. And this possibility has gotten me thinking about all the cantatas that Bach wrote for occasions besides the church services, especially his secular cantatas. Now, to be honest, I have been waiting for an opportunity to discuss the secular cantatas with our St. Thomas audience, and I feel like this cantata, BWV 117, with its possible non-liturgical origins, gives me that opening, so I'm going to take it. But then why talk about the secular cantatas? Many listeners at the Bach Vespers may not even be aware that Bach wrote secular cantatas. And if these works are obscure, then it must mean that they're probably not as good as the sacred ones, right? But to that, I would say one reason that we should experience the secular cantatas alongside the sacred is that it gives us a fuller picture of Bach as a working composer and also as a human being. The sacred cantatas, the passions, the motets, obviously show us Bach's serious and profound side, but the secular cantatas show us his sense of humor. The secular cantatas also give us more insight into what his job duties involved. At certain points in his career, he had to write birthday cantatas for his aristocratic bosses. And then after he moved to Leipzig, and after he had written the 4 sacred cycles, he still occasionally produced cantatas for celebrations, say for Leipzig University, or for informal performances at a local coffee shop called Zimmermann's. And I think it's the intersection of these cantatas with everyday life and everyday work that makes them ideal vehicles to get to know Bach and his world better. And besides all of this, the music is still quite good, just as good as the sacred cantatas, in my opinion. Bach, it seems, was constitutionally incapable of compromising on musical quality in any genre, vocal or instrumental. And in his own words, all music was written for the glory of God. And so he brought the same care to his secular works that he lavished on his sacred. So today then, let's look just a little bit about the secular cantatas. According to the Bach Archive in Leipzig, Bach wrote approximately 50 secular cantatas. Now, less than half survive with their music today. For others, we have only a printed libretto that gives us the text that Bach set to music, but not the music itself. Bach wrote these secular cantatas throughout his adult career and at his three places of employment, Weimar, Kärnten, and Leipzig. But then why did Bach write these secular cantatas? Well, they were written for a wide variety of occasions, so many that it kind of makes it difficult to include them all under one label like secular cantatas. It makes it sound like they're all very similar, kind of like the sacred cantatas, when really they're much more varied in their content. Generally speaking, we can put Bach's secular cantatas into three categories: those written for courts or aristocrats, those written for Leipzig civic celebrations, and those written for more intimate occasions like weddings or the coffee shop atmosphere that I mentioned earlier. For help in organizing these varied works, we can turn to the new Bach edition, which is the most prestigious edition available of Bach's complete works and reflects the latest research. The new Bach edition includes the secular cantatas in volumes 35 to 41, and very helpfully places them into these 6 categories that you see on the screen. You can see that the first 3 volumes, 35 to 37, include cantatas written for court celebrations. The next 2 volumes are for city events in Leipzig, because Bach's job title in Leipzig was Thomaskantor and city music director. He had the responsibility to provide music for these occasions. The next volume, number 40, represents a miscellany. You'll find cantatas for weddings and also the so-called coffee cantata, which today might be Bach's most well-known secular cantata. And then finally, volume 41 provides 2 cantatas that Bach wrote on Italian texts, one in Kärnten and one in Leipzig. Now, what I find very helpful about this list of categories is that we can appreciate just how many different types of occasions and settings that Bach provided music for. And it also gives us a glimpse of what life was like for an 18th century court Kapellmeister or the music director of an important city. You know, Bach was the local music man, and providing music for these occasions, this was his job. Now, if you read music, you might be interested in seeing the scores of these works in the new Bach edition. Well, I have good news for you. You can access these scores for free online, and at the end of this presentation, I will tell you how to do that. So now that we've seen a broad overview of the secular cantatas, let's look more closely at a few of them so that we can isolate some important characteristics. The first that I like to focus on is one of his more well-known secular cantatas, and quite possibly the earliest secular cantata that he wrote, Was mir behagt, ist nur die muntre Jagd, or What Contents Me is a Spirited Hunt. It's now numbered as BWV 208. It's nicknamed the Hunt Cantata. Bach wrote it in February of 1713 while he was working at the court in Weimar. He'd been invited by the nearby ducal court of Saxe-Weissenfels to compose a festive musical entertainment to celebrate Duke Christian of Saxe-Weissenfels' 31st birthday. That's Duke Christian there on the right. Now, the birthday banquet was to be held at the Duke's hunting lodge near Weissenfels after the young Duke and his entourage returned from their hunt. And so the hunting theme of the cantata was a response to this birthday party. The Hunt Cantata consists of a dramatic dialogue among 4 mythological characters: Diana, Pallas, Endymion, and Pan. It's a large-scale work that unfolds across 15 movements of recitative, aria, duet, and chorus. And it begins with typical mythological frolicking. Diana sings about how hunting is the passion of the gods, while Endymion flirts with her. But then a few movements in, the characters begin singing about Duke Christian. And it's as though the birthday boy is suddenly pulled into the story. In a recitative, Diana calls Christian the Pan of the forest. And then Pan himself appears, and in his bass aria, he declares, I, who am otherwise a god among these fields, I lay down my shepherd's staff before Christian's scepter of governance. And then the rest of the cantata continues with more of the same. These mythological characters, as embodiments of nature, extol Christian and his wise governance, and they wish him a long life. I want to play just a little bit of the most well-known movement, an aria by Pallas, the soprano, the goddess of shepherds. She sings, "Sheep can safely graze where a good shepherd watches. Where regents govern well, one can sense calm and peace, and that which makes a land prosperous." Now, in setting these words to music, Bach follows the same compositional procedure that he uses with his sacred cantatas. He begins with a close reading of the text, and he allows certain words and images to guide his musical choices. In this case, he wants to create a pastoral, idyllic atmosphere in music. And to do this, he calls upon two recorders to evoke the sound of shepherds piping in accompaniment. The melodies proceed without any awkward leaps or chromatic tension, and the underlying harmonies change very slowly, all of which suggests a world at rest, a world without any strife. So let's listen to the opening of this movement then. Now, I don't know about you, but I still find it a little jarring to hear how time-bound and occasion-specific these works are. Many times when we think of a classical composer like Bach, we assume that they're writing this timeless music. But then a work like this comes along, and it reminds us that Bach wrote plenty of pieces that served a specific event and honored a specific person. In fact, when Bach moved from Weimar to Curtin, these were all the cantatas that he wrote. Because the ruling family in Curtin was Calvinist, it meant that there was no elaborate vocal instrumental music during the church services. However, Bach wrote birthday cantatas for his Curtin employer, Prince Leopold, just as he had done for Duke Christian. And he also had to write New Year's cantatas. After Bach moved to Leipzig, he even wrote more of these, what we can also call congratulatory cantatas. One that comes to mind is BWV 205, which was commissioned by Leipzig University students in honor of a popular professor of law and philosophy, August Friedrich Müller. Once again, the cantata features mythological characters, in this case, Athena, Pomona, Zephyr, and Aeolus, and they pay tribute to Professor Müller, and it all ends with this rousing chorus of "Long live August, vivat August, August vivat, be blessed, scholarly man." Now, I have to say, as a musicologist, that is one of my favorite lines in all of Bach, "Be blessed, scholarly man." But just to drive this point home, even though these cantatas might seem curious, they're also revealing, I think, in a way that the sacred cantatas are not. They show us the 18th century fascination with Greek and Roman mythology and the love of symbolism. They teach us about 18th century social relations, court protocol, and the relationship between aristocrats and servants. And then in their very flowery tributes, they demonstrate the 18th century preference for ornamentation, an aesthetic that also manifests in art and architecture and clothing styles and in the wigs of this time. And so this is why the secular cantatas provide such an important window into Bach's world. Now, even though these cantatas were written for specific people and specific events, Bach regularly recycled their music in his sacred cantatas. And this recycling process is known as musical borrowing. Sometimes people will also refer to it as parody. And composers in Bach's day did this regularly, usually just to keep up with their work demands. If Bach needed a pastoral aria to portray Christ as the Good Shepherd, he could turn to the Sheep May Safely Graze aria that we just heard for Duke Christian. Just change a few words and it works just fine in a religious setting. And in the same way, a celebratory chorus, say for Prince Leopold's birthday in Cöthen, could then be retexted and recycled as an Easter chorus in Leipzig. A great example of this parody process can be seen in Bach's Christmas Oratorio. This particular oratorio recycles several movements from secular cantatas. To be more exact, 19 of its 64 total movements are parodies. So let's just look at one example, the music of the opening movement, which was taken from a secular cantata now numbered as BWV 214. This cantata was written in 1733 for, you probably guessed it, it's another birthday. This one was for Maria Józefa, the Queen of Poland, and the Electress of Saxony, which is basically like the Queen of Saxony. The cantata is called Tönet ihr Pauken, es schallet Trompeten, and here's the text for the opening movement. Sound you drums, ring out trumpets, sounding strings fill the air, sing now songs you spirited poets, long live the Queen is cheerfully exclaimed, long live the Queen, this wishes the Saxon, long live the Queen, and flourish and prosper. Now, if you're already thinking that Bach probably set the celebratory text for a large ensemble with prominent timpani and trumpet parts, you're right on target. So let's listen to a little bit of this music for the Queen. Isn't that great music? It's too great to be used once. I think Bach recognized that as well. And so fortunately, Bach found another use for it. Just 1 year later, in 1734, Bach set himself the task of creating an oratorio for the Christmas season. And for the opening movement, he returned to this music. It has exactly the ecstatic, joyful sound that he's looking for. But the text about long live the Queen, that's going to have to be replaced. And so for this, Bach's librettist wrote new Christmas appropriate words that preserve the poetic meter of the original text. So whereas the original text had a triplet feel, Tönet ihr Pauken, erschallet Trompeten, klingen die Saiten, erfüllet die Luft. You hear the 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. The new Christmas text has the exact same feel. Jauchzet frohlocket, aufpreiset die Tage, zertrümmert, was heute der Höchste getan. And instead of long live the queen, the new text now builds up toward the religious goal, serve the Most High. So now let's listen to the opening of the Christmas oratorio. And I will tell you, it's going to be the same music with different words, but I want to give you that side-by-side experience of hearing the sacred parody after having just heard the secular original. All right, so here's the beginning of the Christmas oratorio. One last point that I want to make about the secular cantatas is that they give us a chance to hear Bach trying his hand at some of the popular musical styles of his day. The Coffee Cantata of 1734, BWV 211, is essentially a miniature comic opera, or a closely related genre called an intermezzo. It features a frustrated, bumbling father named Schlendrian and his coffee-loving daughter, Liesken, and a small part for a narrator. Schlendrian's simple, pattering delivery, contrast with Liesken's more lyrical melodies, reflect typical comic opera character types. And the ending also recalls the subtly subversive outcomes of comic opera as Liesken upends the power dynamics and outsmarts her father, the older man. In the end, she determines that she will gain a husband, and then she will also keep her coffee. And then another cantata that alludes to popular music is the Peasant Cantata, BWV 212. Dating to 1742, this was likely Bach's last cantata of any of the cantatas that he wrote. It features a series of recitatives, arias, and duets between an unnamed farmer and his wife, Mika, commenting on their new governor, who is a tax collector, and his wife. And their feelings are clearly ambivalent. They call the governor a sulfurous man for his power to punish them, but they honor him all the same. To accompany these simple folk, Bach drew on a much simpler style than what we find in his sacred cantatas. Parts of the overture sound like foot-stomping dance music, and the opening duet between the farmer and his wife, Wir haben ein neuer Oberkeit, or We Have a New Governor, sounds like the kind of simple folkish song that you might find in a theater piece of the day, which is known as a Singspiel. So we're going to listen to this opening duet, Wir haben eine neue Oberkeit, because I want you to hear how different the music sounds from what we usually expect from Bach. The text is also deliberately simple, with short lines and lots of Upper Saxon dialect, all of which contribute to the folkish peasant character. If you're used to hearing things like the sacred cantatas, the St. Matthew, St. John Passion, when you hear this, you will know that we're a long way from the St. Matthew Passion. But here is Wir haben eine neue Oberkeit. think it's easy to go on and on about these secular cantatas, but I do need to say a few words about the cantata for this week, BWV 117. At the beginning of my talk, I mentioned that this cantata has some unusual features that make scholars think that it was perhaps not intended originally for a regular Sunday morning church service. So let's get into those features. The slide here shows the 9-movement layout for this cantata. I will say that the first movement includes a chorale, which has caused people to think that perhaps Bach intended this cantata to fill a gap in his second cycle, which, as I've mentioned in previous weeks, is the chorale cantata cycle. However, there are other facts that argue against this. In Bach's second cycle, the cantatas are generally 6 to 7 movements long, and they end with a simple 4-part harmonization of the chorale theme. In BWV 117, the 9-movement length is a little unusual, but even more surprising is the placement of the simple 4-part harmonization in the middle of the cantata as the 4th movement. I also want to point out that the last movement of BWV 117 repeats the music of the first movement, but just with a different stanza of the chorale text. Now, this is also something that Bach doesn't do in his second cycle. So what's going on here? Again, we don't know for sure. It could be that this is just a somewhat curious general purpose cantata that Bach wanted available for any occasion. He already had some cantatas like this in his library. If he needed something, he could just pull it off the shelf for any Sunday. But it's probably more likely that this cantata was composed for a ceremonial occasion. But then what kind of ceremony? Well, a clue might lie in the chorale melody, which the scholar Alfred Durr has pointed out was customary at weddings. Now, this wedding music possibility may explain the weird placement of the simple 4-part harmonization in the middle of the cantata. So perhaps the first 4 movements were played before the ceremony, and then the last 5 were played after the ceremony. And then finally, another support for the wedding hypothesis is the dance-like, joyful atmosphere of the cantata, particularly of the opening movement, which again is repeated as the final movement. To give you a sample of this cantata, I thought we'd listen to a little bit of the alto aria, Ich will dich all mein Leben lang. The text reads, I will glorify you my whole life long, O God, from now onward. One shall, O God, hear the song of praise in all locations. My whole heart is reassured, my spirit and body are glad. Give our God the glory. Bach responds to the gladness of spirit and body with a suggestion of dance music. The aria's 3/4 meter and regular 4-measure phrasing recall the minuet. So let's listen to just a short clip of this. I'm sure Carlton's about to give me the hook, but before I go, I always like to provide a suggestion for further study for all of you overachievers who attend this webinar. Tonight, I discussed a number of Bach's secular cantatas. If you read music and you'd like to see the scores for these cantatas yourself, you can access them for free at www.imslp.org. IMSLP stands for the International Music Score Library Project, and there you can find thousands of scores by hundreds of composers. It is a wonderful resource. Now, when you go to imslp.org, just click on the scores drop-down menu. Then you can click on the composers option. After that, then you just click on B in the alphabet and search for Bach, Johann Sebastian. And then once you're on Bach's page, you can search for compositions. They're alphabetical by title. So very easy. To get a list of composition titles, you can simply Google Bach secular cantatas, or you can go to Wikipedia and search for Bach secular cantatas. You'll find a list of all the cantatas along with their BWV number. And then finally, if you want to have a score and listen to with a recording, you can just go to YouTube and search by cantata title and BWV number. So happy listening. All right, I think that is it for me. So I will go ahead and throw it back to you, Carlton.
Thank you, Adam. That was fantastic. I loved, in particular, hearing humor in Bach's music, because you're right, that is not something that you find in most of the sacred cantatas. So that's that makes me want to start a new series dedicated to the secular cantatas.
I was hoping you would say that.
Yeah, why not? All right, well, let's turn our attention to Kate. Kate, thanks again for being here. So you're the first singer we've had on the BachTalk webinars.
Wow,
we've had
I'm so honored.
Yeah, I know. So I kind of want to start there and talk about your approach to singing Bach and maybe how it differs from other music. I know you do a lot of singing in a lot of different styles. So give us some information about how singing Bach is different for you.
Absolutely. Well, yes, as Carlton mentioned, I feel so fortunate. It maybe caused a lot of vocal identity crises during my 20s because I love singing so many different kinds of things. But the good news is that I've learned now in my mid 30s that everything really does kind of correlate, and that I learn from different experiences, and I can really bring all of these different tools to whatever I'm working on at the time. And that's just thrilling. Singing Bach in particular and working on new music with living composers, those are two seemingly disparate things, but in a lot of ways, those are the experiences that I find really challenge and elevate me the most as a musician. And I try to incorporate enough of that throughout every season because it really is what's keeping my technique at its highest peak that I can, but also I just find it very fulfilling. And even though you have a composer from 400 years back and working with living composers, it's just so interesting. Working with living composers, I approach every piece now as if I'm working with the composer, so I'd like to think Bach and I would be friends. I don't know. I would hope so. But it definitely changes the way that I approach things. So it's just been really varied and fulfilling in that way. My background in singing, I'm a third generation singer, and I grew up hearing my mom sing and play the piano to Cole Porter and the classics and lots of sacred music. So even though Bach was kind of in my core, I wasn't consciously aware of him. And growing up singing at church, having all of my very first solos at the church setting, this kind of combines a lot of who I am as a person and who I am as a musician, and allows me to create these just these great pieces with the very, very top musicians who allow me to be a part of their circle, but also really singing to the glory of God in a way that with the absolute top kinds of compositions. It's wonderful. And I'm always so glad to be a part of it. Thanks for making that happen.
Oh, absolutely. No, it's always great to have you. And I always appreciate when you come because you have a very dedicated approach to preparation, and you're a conductor's dream because I don't ever worry about you.
Oh, wonderful.
So take the aria that's in this cantata. So what are your first steps with a new aria like that? What do you like? How do you like to break it down?
Yeah. So the good thing is that if you like a challenge, you can continuously find more and more layers. That's the thing. I am never bored with kind of delving further and further into a piece. And then eventually you have to stop because it's performance time, but you kind of hope that you keep growing from that. So I do about the same thing that I do with every new piece I'm approaching. It's not different that way with Bach. I will speak through the text. My German, I would say, in terms of understanding what I'm singing, is quite good. I'm not a great German speaker, but I can look at the text, and it's at this point now, there's very few things that I actually have to look up in the dictionary to know what I'm singing. So I'll speak through that first, and then I sing through that. And the great thing is now with YouTube and all of these amazing sources online, you can go and listen to every single recording of it that ever existed, but I make sure that I have sung through it first and already have some plans and ideas for what
that was going to be
do.
one of my questions.
Yes.
Was where you involve recordings in the process.
Yes, I only allow myself to listen to another recording of what I'm going to sing, maybe once, maybe twice. And then eventually I create my own recordings. I kind of act as my own vocal coach, vocal teacher while I'm doing that. And I will listen to my own recordings, write a lot of notes, and do that. And then to kind of keep going further in, I find those rebellious notes by Bach. You know, there's sometimes when you're singing or you're playing a chord and you think, well, no, that can't be right. And sometimes it's because it's not right. And then other times it's because, no, that's awesome. That's meant to be super crunchy and weird. That is really cool. And to kind of go back and say, now, why is he doing that there? You know? And also the text, I love singing in German so much. So, you know, you have all those consonant clusters. Can I really kind of use that to really paint the text, the sort of things, you know, it's just so much fun.
And that's very different than other languages, right? I mean, it's just because you've got to give the consonants ample time, right? And sort of linger on them a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. I cannot speak as an authority on this at all, but a few singers and I over the years have had some interesting conversations about this with face shapes in relation to your heritage. And I have a lot of German blood. And then I have some friends who are, you know, 75% Czech, and they just say they love singing Czech repertoire. And is it because it just feels like a part of you somehow, or is it that this, you know, something about your makeup really lends to that? You know, who knows?
Yeah, that's
so
really
I feel
interesting.
I really love singing German, and actually German at my little country school in Central Illinois, we had somebody come in who taught German for 1 year, which was unheard of. So that was actually my very first foreign language for 1 year in high school. Maybe that has something to do with it.
Well, speaking of Central Illinois, that's a perfect segue, because the other thing I wanted to talk to you about is something that I've obviously been involved with as well, and that is the summer music festival that you started in your hometown called Poco a Poco. And the reason, I mean, I'm very biased in that I love it, but I want you to talk about it a little bit. But I think it's interesting because, you know, one aspect of Bach's career was his work with young singers. He was responsible for the young boy singers that would be singing most of the sacred cantatas and their music instruction. And so I thought it would be interesting to talk with you a little bit about that. So why don't you give us a little background about Poco a Poco, what it is, and how it got started?
Sure. So I grew up in a town of about 13,000, Streator, Illinois. It's about 100 miles southwest of Chicago. And I still have to pinch myself that I get to do amazing things like talking about Bach on a podcast, because singing professionally was something I never knew that you did, or that I specifically could do, or would, you know, have the opportunities and the training and all of the things come together to be able to do this. So it still feels surreal all the time. And I grew up with a very supportive musical family, so I was very lucky that way. But I also was very aware growing up that, you know, either the Midwest or small towns, there's this idea maybe that, you know, we don't have all of the great amenities and opportunities that you might get in a big city. And there's a tiny little stubbornness in me, which is good and bad at times. And there's a lot of hometown pride. So over decades long career now, I've just made amazing contacts and I've learned so much. And I think back to 16-year-old Kate growing up in Streator a lot, you know, just thinking, oh my gosh, this would totally have blown my mind getting exposed to this. So basically, with singing, I absolutely love it. I love that I get to learn new languages and cultures and meet all these really fascinating people and travel and do all these great things and really try to make my my voice and my performance and technique the very best that I can. But something has always been a little bit missing. I've always felt this desire to give back. I love mentoring and I love working with young singers and helping them build that confidence regardless of what their future is going to be. Helping them realize that they can be a part of a community choir their whole life long, or they might actually have the chops to go and study music. So Poco a Poco, to answer the question that you asked 5 minutes ago, is a week-long music festival that primarily focuses on an intensive and interactive training program for high school aged musicians. I find that since I was in high school, things have shifted a lot, and there is such a stress on specialization in high school. And even within music, there's that drive to be really specialized. And that makes me pretty sad because I love doing so many different things. And even though all through my teens and all through my 20s, a lot of people have said you have to choose. And it's true. You do get to a point in your life where you have to say, okay, 4 jobs is enough. But everything that I've gotten to do culminates into what I can bring to a performance or, you know, just everything that I get to do in my career. So we bring in fantastic people. Carlton is actually the director of choral activities. He's been with us since the beginning. We have high school students. They all have private voice lessons. They sing in the choir with Carlton. They sing in the community choir. We have world-class faculty that comes in and works with the students. The students get to sing alongside the professionals and vice versa. It's just this really amazing melting pot of multi-generational people that just love music, want to create a space that is respectful, really high quality, but also really positive. I don't allow anything other than positive and respectful. And it's just really neat. The students get to try their hand at all sorts of things in this very nice place. But on top of that training program, then we have our faculty concert and the student showcase. Our community choir culminates the whole time. And, you know, we're very proud to say we have gone 5 consecutive years. We did have a festival in 2020, and it was all virtual, and it was very interesting. If I had really known what it was going to take on, I may or may not have rethought that. But and we had a hybrid festival last year, and this year in 2022, we'll be able to have this really great event on the summer solstice. That's the International Make Music Day. We have different events through there, and we're going to be growing from as many as 4 events annually to 6 or 7 in 2022. So it's really exciting because it's gotten a lot of momentum. People love it, and it's just grown something beyond anything I could have ever dreamed at this point. And it brings together everything I love. I get to mentor. I get to be in my happy place. I get to bring these fantastic performances back to so many people that helped define who I am and helped me and was my village raising me. But I also get to create opportunities for fantastic professionals that I think are really good models and really good at what they do, and they care about teaching. It's just awesome. Administration, mentoring, performing, managing, it kind of finally fills that little bit of that void that I was feeling so that I can teach and sing and do all these other things. And it's really kind of amazing. Everything's kind of coming together.
It is amazing. It's a wonderful event, and I have loved being a part of it. Even in the challenging summers when we were dealing with COVID, and all of the ramifications there too. I liked what you said too about what's different for that age group now versus when you were that age, and because I think about that a lot. I think about what I was like as a high school student. Oh my gosh, I don't even want to think about that.
Let's not go there. I mean, that's
no way.
We don't want to think about me either.
but how different the world is in every way, and how that affects how children learn music, how they incorporate music into their lives, how they see it. I think it's a really fascinating angle of one of the things that you have to consider. So the other thing that I think is notable about Poco a Poco, which you also touched on, was the idea of community, because obviously you love your hometown, and that is part of the reason you started this. But I've noticed, being an outsider, what a community event it started with and has become even more, over the years. And I think about that too with my own work. I think when you're young and a musician, you have these dreams of what success is going to look like. And it always is big, right? It's a big stage, and there's lots of people out there. And then what I've discovered for me is that the big stage has lost its appeal for me, because I'm much more interested in those 150 people that come to Bach Vespers once a month. That's the community that we're making music for. And yes, I'd love to spread the word and share it far and wide, but I'm much more invested in that kind of more local music community than I would have thought I would have been interested in, years ago. Do you kind of feel that same way
with the big stage versus that? I really like singing on a big stage.
Well, I know that's not a good question to ask a singer, because singers love big.
That's true. No, I really love singing, and I really love performing. But like you say, everybody has to find that balance for them, and that's what I realized was kind of missing. I now am a mother of two daughters, and even though any normal person wouldn't have started a nonprofit when they were 10 months pregnant with their first child, and then try to create a hybrid festival during COVID with a 1-month-old. Nobody would normally do that. That's a little crazy. Like, that's not advisable, I would say. You don't have to do it that way. Yep. But really finding that balance, and it's because I have this other opportunity that really keeps me grounded, and also finding other people that feel in that same way. It gives me the resolve and the ability to go and do other things, because for me, doing just the traveling and singing on the big stages, that would never be enough for me. And I've known that for a long time, but I wasn't able to quite pinpoint that. So it really is kind of allowing that to meld, and it gives me the fortitude to do that, and also to be able to say, okay, my family and my life is very important to me, and there are certain priorities that I just don't want to dismiss, because I know how important they are. So how do I approach all these other things and make them? So it's been really interesting, as I have more roles as lead, I find that I have, maybe it's more also confidence, but because of my position in that particular production, I feel like I have a little more power in creating the space that I want to work in. And that's really great. And I think some of that has come from saying, why not create the space we want to at Poco a Poco, you know? Why not be able to do all these kinds of things? And for me, growing up, you know, I would say, oh, I'm not a good improviser. I can't compose. I can't do these things. And I started realizing that I was saying that without actually having tried it, or without actually having the skills and the ability and the mentors, you know, just reaching out to say that. So that's something that's come out of it that I think is really fascinating, to watch students' eyes just like those little mini mind explosions. Those are
Yeah,
awesome.
That's
Those
the
are
best
awesome.
part.
But yeah, it's unbelievably rewarding, unbelievably rewarding. And for me, it would not succeed anywhere else other than Streeter, because especially starting out, it takes a while, of course, as you know, it takes a while to really gain the trust of people, that if they're going to give the time to come to your events, everybody's time is such a precious resource. To come to one of your events, you know, they want to know, are they going to be touched? Is it going to be high quality? All those sorts of things. And so that all takes a long time, and it can be a little frustrating at the beginning, but it is so important and so so rewarding when it starts, when you start realizing. Just today I was in another town an hour from Streeter, and I said something about Poco a Poco, and a young man was like, wait, I've heard of that. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's yes, you know, because there's still a lot of what sort of thing.
Right.
But it's yeah.
That's wonderful.
It's a great thing.
Well, I think we probably ought to wrap up, but Kate, it's so great to have you here. Thanks for talking about Bach and singing and Poco a Poco. That was wonderful to hear all of that. Adam, as always, fantastic job on the lecture. I'm already envisioning a special concert with the Bach Ensemble where I know it's not called the beer cantata, but the Oberkeit cantata started about drinking beer. So I thought the coffee on the first half and the beer on the second half. That sounds like a winning concert to me. So.
Saturday night cantata series.
That's there you go. All right, coming soon, Saturday night cantata series. You heard it here.
It.
All right. Well, thank you both for joining me, and for everyone who is listening or watching this later, because we will release this as a video on our YouTube channel and as a podcast, and you can visit bachensemble.org to find out exactly how to listen to those or watch them, and maybe you might want to share them with friends who might be interested. We'd love for you to do that, but we also hope we can see you at Bach Vespers soon. Kate, we'll see you in a week on November the 21st for Bach Vespers at 5 p.m. at St. Thomas. So thanks, everyone.
To it.
All right. Have a good night.
Carlton, thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.